The hearing had already turned against him when the steel began to hum. Ransom Cade stood behind the long table in the Caesarea Antiquities Tribunal chamber, his hands flat on the polished stone surface, and listened to the Directorate's chief counsel explain why every artifact recovered from the Belvathi dig site should be surrendered to the Caesarean government for immediate disassembly and study. The counsel was a tall Caesarean female named Irath Vel, and she spoke the way her species always spoke in formal proceedings, with a measured, unhurried cadence that treated every sentence like a foundation stone being laid for a wall that would outlast the speaker. Her crest feathers, pale gray tipped with copper, lay flat against her skull in the position of judicial authority. The artifacts recovered by Mr. Cade and his team are of unknown origin, unknown function, and unknown risk, she said, turning a holopad toward the tribunal panel. Under Section 41 of the Accord Heritage Act, any artifact of indeterminate provenance found within sovereign Caesarean territory is subject to state custody pending full analysis. Mr. Cade's institution, the Terran Heritage Foundation, holds no sovereignty claim, no extraction treaty, and no bilateral research agreement with the Caesarean Directorate. His team operated under a general survey license. That license does not extend to the recovery and off-world transport of active artifacts. Active, that was the word she leaned into, not ancient, not valuable, active. Ransom watched the three tribunal judges process the word. Two of them, both senior Caesarean officials in formal robes that covered their arms to the wrist, shifted in their seats. The third, a younger male with a dark crest and sharp eyes, did not move. He had been watching Ransom since the hearing began with an expression that sat somewhere between professional interest and something older, something that looked like recognition even though Ransom was certain they had never met. "If I may respond," Ransom said. Irath Vel gestured with one hand, a precise quarter rotation that meant the floor was his. Ransom straightened. He was 53 years old, broad across the shoulders, with the kind of weathered skin that came from spending more years on dig sites than in offices. His hands were calloused from trowel work, the knuckles scarred from pulling artifacts out of stone and clay on worlds where the weather did not care about human skin. His hair had gone iron gray at the temples. He wore a clean shirt and pressed trousers for the tribunal, but the shirt was the kind a man wore when he owned 3 of them, and this was the best one. He was the senior curator of the Terran Heritage Foundation's off-world recovery program, and he had spent 19 years pulling human artifacts out of places where humans had no business having left them. Stone tools on an airless moon, a navigation marker in a breviary ruin that matched, glyph for glyph, a script found in a cave on the Iberian Peninsula on Earth, a fragment of worked metal in the deepest stratum of a Morevi dig site, stamped with a maker's mark that 3 separate xenolinguists had identified as proto-Terran. Every recovery had been a fight. Governments wanted jurisdiction, institutions wanted research access, collectors wanted ownership. The steel from Belvathi was the largest, the most intact, and the most dangerous to his career. If the glyphs were what his team believed, it would upend the Accord's chronological framework. If they were wrong, or if the tribunal ruled against him, the Directorate would disassemble it for study, and the most significant artifact Ransom had ever recovered would be reduced to a set of spectral analysis data points in a Caesarean government database. "The steel is not Caesarean," he said. "The glyphs on its surface are not in any Caesarean script, historical or contemporary. They are not in any Accord-registered language. The carbon dating places the stone at a minimum of 4,000 years old, which predates the Caesarean colonial period on Belvathi by 2,000 years. Whatever built that steel was on Belvathi before the Caesarean people arrived. It does not fall under Section 41 because it is not of Caesarean provenance. It belongs to whoever made it, and the only candidates in the archaeological record whose script matches even partial elements of the inscription are human." Silence in the chamber. The kind of silence that followed a claim no one wanted to examine too closely. Irath Vel recovered first. Mr. Cade, you are suggesting that humans built a monument on Kessaran soil 2,000 years before the Kessaran people colonized that world. I am stating what the evidence shows. The Foundation's xenolinguist confirmed 17 partial matches between the Stele's glyphs and Proto-Terran root script. Proto-Terran, not modern standard, not colonial pidgin. The root script that predates human spaceflight by millennia. The script we carved into cave walls before we built cities. That is impossible. The Stele exists, the glyphs match. I did not write the evidence, Counsel Vel, I am reporting it. Irath Vel turned to the tribunal panel and activated a holographic display that projected the Directorate's own analysis above the table. The Directorate's mineralogical team has examined the artifact's surface composition. They found no match in any known geological database, Kessaran, Accord, or Terran. The material is unclassified. The glyph cutting technique uses tolerances that exceed current Accord manufacturing precision by an order of magnitude. And the artifact's internal structure, based on passive sonar, suggests a lattice arrangement that is not consistent with natural stone formation. She paused to let the data settle. Mr. Cade claims this is a human artifact. The Directorate's position is that the artifact's origin cannot be determined with current data, and therefore it must remain under controlled study until it can be. Releasing an artifact of unknown capability to a 3-person crew on a survey vessel is irresponsible at best and dangerous at worst. Ransom felt the argument shifting beneath him. She was not wrong about the material. His own team had spent 3 days trying to identify the stone and had failed, but the glyphs were another matter. The material may be unclassified, Ransom said, but the language is not. Proto-Terran root script has been documented on 7 continents of Earth, in sites dating back 12,000 years. The Stele's glyphs share 17 confirmed morphological matches with that script. The Directorate's mineralogical team, with respect, did not conduct a linguistic analysis. They examined the stone. I am talking about what is written on it. The elder judge on the left, a female with a silver-white crest that had been impressive decades ago and was now thinning at the edges, leaned forward. Mr. Cade, you understand that this claim, if accepted, would require a fundamental revision of the Accord's historical timeline. Humans are a younger species. Kessaran records place your earliest off-world presence at roughly 1,200 years ago. The Accord's historical timeline is based on the records that survived, Ransom said. Not on the records that were buried, broken, or carved into stone on worlds no one surveyed until last year. That is a convenient position for someone seeking to remove an artifact from sovereign jurisdiction. It is an inconvenient position for everyone, Judge, including me. I have spent 19 years operating within the Accord's timeline. If the Stele is what the glyphs suggest, then 19 years of my own published work needs revision. I'm not making this claim lightly. Ransom paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the flat, careful weight of a man laying out facts he wished were different. The Stele was found in a subsurface chamber on Belvathi, buried under 3 meters of volcanic sediment from an eruption that geological surveys date to approximately 3,800 years ago. That means the Stele was in place before the eruption. It was standing in a constructed chamber, walls, floor, ceiling, all cut from the same unidentified material when the volcano buried it. We found it because Belvathi's last dust season exposed a corner of the chamber roof. My team excavated the rest. The chamber had no entrance, no door, no tunnel, no access shaft. It was sealed. The Stele was meant to be found, but not easily and not by accident. The second elder judge, a heavy-set male whose formal robe strained across his chest, spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and carried the deliberate weight of someone accustomed to having his words recorded. You are asking this tribunal to accept that the entire chronological framework of Accord archaeology is wrong. I am asking this tribunal to look at a 4,000-year-old stone covered in proto-Terran glyphs and tell me who else could have put it there. The heavy-set judge did not answer, but his hands shifted on the table, his fingers spreading flat against the surface in the Kessaran posture that meant a statement had landed and required internal processing. The female elder's crest feathers compressed another fraction of a degree. Irathvel pressed the opening. Even if the linguistic claim has merit, and the Directorate does not concede that it does, the artifact's active properties make it a matter of public safety. Mr. Cade's own field notes describe anomalous energy readings from the stone, readings that his equipment could not categorize. The Directorate has a responsibility to assess any potential threat before allowing the artifact to leave this system. The stele has been on Belvathi for 4,000 years without threatening anyone, Ransom said. And in 4,000 years, no one has touched it with bare hands. You did. Your own field log records that the anomalous readings began after physical contact. What if the next contact produces something more than readings? That landed. Ransom saw it in the elder judge's postures, in the way the heavy-set male's shoulders drew back a fraction, in the way the female elder's gaze dropped to the table's surface, as if she could see through it to the vault below. The fear of the unknown was a universal lever, and Irathvel knew how to pull it. In the brief silence that followed, the young judge with the dark crest leaned forward. His eyes had not left Ransom. Mr. Cade, you have been recovering artifacts from off-world sites for how long? 19 years. And in that time, how many artifacts have you encountered that showed proto-Terran script elements? Ransom paused. The question was not hostile, but it was loaded. This is the first. The first in 19 years. And you found it here, on Kessaran sovereign territory, in a dig site that was licensed for survey only. And you removed it from the ground, transported it to your ship, and were preparing to leave the system when the Directorate's patrol intercepted you. We were not fleeing. We were transporting the artifact to a proper conservation facility. The Belvathi site is exposed to seasonal dust storms with particle velocities that would strip paint from hull plating. The steel was deteriorating. Was it? The question hung in the air. Ransom understood what it meant. The steel was not deteriorating. In 4,000 years of exposure to Belvathi's brutal weather, the stone showed no erosion, no pitting, no loss of glyph definition. Whatever material it was carved from, and his team's spectrographic analysis had returned results that matched no known mineral in the Accord geological database. It was engineered to endure. He had used the deterioration argument because it was the only legal basis for emergency extraction under a survey license, and everyone in the room knew it. The stele, Ransom said carefully, is unlike anything in the archaeological record. It deserves study by specialists who understand human proto-script. The Kessaran Directorate does not have proto-Terran linguists on staff. The Foundation does. Then the Foundation may apply for a research partnership under Section 63, Irathvel said, straightening her holopad with a crisp, final motion that signaled she considered the argument concluded. In the meantime, the artifact remains in Kessaran custody. I move for immediate transfer to the Directorate's secure archive, where it will be cataloged, sampled, and subjected to material analysis under controlled conditions. Sampled, the word hit Ransom like a fist. Sampled meant drilling. Sampled meant core extractions, surface scrapings, molecular-level dissection of the glyph channels. Sampled meant treating a 4,000-year-old monument like a mineral deposit, and reducing it to data points in a spectral analysis report that would be filed in a database no human researcher would ever have access to. He opened his mouth to object, and that was when the stele hummed. The sound came from below, from the holding vault beneath the tribunal chamber, where the artifact had been stored pending the hearing's outcome. It was not loud. It was barely audible, a low, sustained vibration that Ransom felt more in his sternum than in his ears, the way you feel the low note of an organ in a cathedral before you consciously hear it. But it silenced the room the way a heartbeat silences a room when someone puts a stethoscope to a chest that should be still. The elder judges looked at each other. Irath Vel's crest feathers lifted involuntarily, the copper tips catching the chamber's overhead light. The young judge stood up. His dark crest had risen to full extension, the barbs separated and trembling, a response Ransom had never seen from a Kessaran in a formal setting. The judge looked at the floor, then at Ransom, and his expression shifted from recognition to something that could only be called certainty. "It knows you are here," the judge said. "Excuse me." "The artifact. It has been silent since it was brought into this building 3 days ago, silent for 4,000 years before that, according to your own data. It is speaking now, while you stand in this room." The judge looked at his two colleagues. "I would like to see the artifact." Irath Vel began to protest, citing custody protocols and environmental controls, and the risk of contamination from unauthorized proximity. The elder judges exchanged glances loaded with the particular discomfort of officials who had spent their careers adjudicating mineral rights and trade disputes, and were now being asked to assess something that did not fit in any of their procedural categories. But the hum was growing, threading up through the stone floor, through the polished table, through Ransom's palms, and the vibration carried with it a quality that transcended sound, a weight, an age, a patience that made the tribunal chamber feel suddenly temporary, as if the room and everyone in it were standing on a thin crust over something vastly older. The young judge was already walking toward the stairs. Ransom followed. He did not ask permission. Something in the quality of the vibration made asking permission feel absurd, like requesting a hall pass during an earthquake. Behind him, he heard Irath Vel's sharp command to the chamber guards, heard the elder judges rising from their seats with rustling robes and muttered objections, heard the controlled chaos of a formal proceeding coming apart at its seams. The holding vault was 2 levels below the tribunal chamber, accessed by a narrow stone stairway with motion-activated lighting that flickered on as the judge descended. The guards at the vault door, 2 Kessaran males in directorate armor, armed with sidearms they had clearly not expected to need during what should have been a routine custody hearing, straightened when they saw the judge's crest at full extension. In Kessaran body language, a fully raised crest in a judicial context meant one of 2 things: supreme authority being exercised, or genuine alarm. Either way, you did not stand in its path. "Open the vault," the judge said. The guards opened the vault. The stele stood in the center of the room on a reinforced platform, bathed in the flat white light of conservation lamps. It was 2 meters tall, carved from a single piece of stone so dark it looked like a slab of compressed night. Its surface was covered in glyphs, thousands of them, each one cut with a precision that Ransom's team had measured at tolerances of less than 1/10 of a millimeter. The cuts were not weathered, not softened, not filled with mineral deposits from 4 millennia of groundwater exposure. They were as sharp as the day they had been made, each line a tiny canyon of mathematical exactness carved into a material that resisted every tool Ransom's mineralogist had tried to scratch it with. It was humming. The sound filled the vault like a living thing, resonant and low, and the glyphs were doing something Ransom had not seen before. They were glowing. Not all of them, not yet. But a sequence along the stele's western face had begun to fill with a cold white light that originated from within the stone itself, each glyph illuminating for 2 or 3 seconds before fading as the next one lit. The sequence moved from bottom to top, climbing the stele like a question ascending toward its answer. 3 days in this vault, the judge said quietly, 3 days of silence, and the moment you enter this building it wakes. The elder judges had reached the bottom of the stairs. They stood in the vault doorway, their robes still settling, and stared at the glowing glyphs with the expressions of people watching certainty dissolve. The female elder's crest had gone flat against her skull, not the flat of authority, but the flat of surrender, the involuntary compression of a mind encountering something it could not file in any existing category. The heavyset male elder had taken one step into the vault and stopped, his hands clasped in front of him in the formal Kessaran posture for confronting the sacred. Irath Vel stood behind them. Her holopad was at her side, forgotten. Her copper-tipped crest feathers had risen in irregular tufts, the loss of controlled positioning that a Kessaran experienced only under emotional duress. For the first time since the hearing began, she was not arguing. Ransom stared at the steel. In 19 years of field recovery, he had handled thousands of artifacts. Pottery shards and blade fragments and navigation markers, and corroded data cores and all the mundane debris that civilizations leave behind when they move on or die out. He had held them in his hands and cataloged them and stored them and shipped them to museums where they would sit behind glass and explain small pieces of the past to people who would never touch them. He had never held anything that responded to his presence. "May I approach it?" he asked. The judge looked at Ransom for a long moment, then at the elder judges in the doorway. The female elder gave a single, small nod. The male elder did not move, which in Kessaran formal protocol was indistinguishable from consent. The judge stepped aside. Ransom crossed the vault floor, 6 meters. At 5, the hum deepened, settling into a frequency that vibrated in his molars and made the fillings in his back teeth ring like tiny tuning forks. The conservation lamps overhead flickered once, as if the power grid had hiccuped, though the steel's own light did not waver. At 4 meters, the glyphs on the eastern face began to light, the illumination sequence spreading like fire catching dry grass, each glyph blazing for a heartbeat, and handing its light to the next in a chain reaction that climbed the stone's height in seconds. Behind him, one of the vault guards took a step backward. The heavy-set elder judge made a sound deep in his throat, not a word, not a protest, just the involuntary vocalization of a body confronting something its training had not prepared it for. At 3 meters, the northern face joined the eastern. The light was brighter now, and the hum had acquired harmonics, secondary frequencies layering over the bass tone like voices joining a chorus one at a time. The air in the vault felt different, thicker, charged with the particular static that preceded electrical storms on worlds where the atmosphere carried enough metallic dust to conduct. At 2 meters, the southern face ignited. Every glyph on 3 of the 4 faces was cycling now. Thousands of white fire points climbing and fading and climbing again, in sequences that overlapped and interlocked. The patterns forming larger shapes that Ransom's eye could almost parse, geometric constructions that hinted at meaning the way a word in a foreign language hints at meaning when you catch half a cognate, and your brain strains to complete the rest. The 4th face, the face directly in front of him, the face he was walking toward, remained dark, waiting. By the time he stood 1 meter from the steel, the hum had deepened into something that vibrated in the bones of his jaw and the roots of his teeth, and the hollows behind his ears where sound becomes feeling. The 3 lit faces were blazing, the vault's conservation lamps irrelevant now, the steel generating more light than the entire room's electrical system. And the 4th face held its darkness, a rectangle of unlit stone surrounded by fire, as deliberate as a held breath. He raised his right hand and placed his palm flat against the dark surface. The stone was warm, not hot warm, the way a living thing is warm, the way skin is warm when you press your hand to someone's chest and feel the engine beneath. The glyphs under his palm went bright, burning white, and the light spread outward from his hand in concentric rings that raced across every face of the steel simultaneously, each ring igniting fresh glyphs as it passed, the entire surface blazing with a light that should have been blinding but was instead precise, controlled, illumination with intent. Every glyph on the artifact ignited at once. The hum stopped. The silence that replaced it was not empty. It was full, pressurized, the kind of silence that exists in the moment between a question asked and an answer given, when both parties know the answer will change everything and neither is willing to rush it. Behind him, someone inhaled sharply. He did not turn to see who. A single line of new glyphs appeared on the face directly in front of Ransom, emerging from the stone as if they had always been there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right hand to call them forward. They glowed brighter than the others, not white but pale gold, the color of old sunlight preserved in amber, and they formed a sequence that his xenolinguist's partial translation matrix could not have parsed, but that something deeper in him, something below language and training and 19 years of professional distance, understood the way you understand your own name when someone speaks it in a room you thought was empty. The steel spoke. Not in sound, in light, in vibration, in a transmission that bypassed his ears and arrived directly in the part of his mind where meaning lives before words dress it up. A single phrase, 6 syllables, delivered with the weight of 4,000 years of patience. Warden of the Unbroken line. Ransom did not move. His hand stayed on the stone. The gold light pulsed once, twice, 3 times beneath his palm, and each pulse carried a cascade of information that arrived not as data, but as memory, as if the steel was returning to him something that had always been his, something held in trust across millennia, waiting for the right carrier to claim it. He saw the line. Not a bloodline, though blood was part of it. Not a dynasty, though generations were part of it. The unbroken line was a chain of custody, a trust, maintained across 4,000 years by people who understood that some things must be kept whole or they lose their meaning entirely. A sequence of humans, stretching back to an era when the Accord did not exist, and the species that would one day found it were still building their first stone cities, each one entrusted with a single responsibility: the protection of artifacts that predated every civilization in the galaxy. Artifacts that humans had built. The knowledge arrived as certainty, the way you know your own name, the way you know which direction is down. 4,000 years ago, and possibly longer, humans had traveled to worlds across the galaxy and left markers. Not weapons, not colonies, markers. Custodial waypoints in a network designed to preserve something. The stele was one of 47. 47 markers placed on 47 worlds, each one carved from the same impossible material and inscribed with the same proto-Terran root script and equipped with the same capacity to lie dormant for millennia until the right hand touched its surface. The network was not military. It was not colonial. The humans who had built it had been keepers, not conquerors, archivists of a truth so large that it could only be preserved in stone, in the patient language of glyphs cut into materials engineered to outlast not just the civilizations built around them, but the geological epochs that would reshape the planets they stood on. And the Wardens were the ones who maintained the chain, who found the markers when they surfaced, when erosion uncovered them, when construction crews dug into them, when survey teams flagged them as anomalies and someone had the sense to look closer, who protected them from the forces that destroyed artifacts throughout history. Not weather, not war, but study. The well-intentioned, methodical, irreversible disassembly that institutions called analysis, and that reduced irreplaceable wholes into cataloged fragments. The stele showed him what happened when a marker was broken. Not in words, but in absence, a gap in the network, a word deleted from a sentence. 3 of the 47 had been lost, one shattered by a mining operation, one drilled and sampled by researchers who had filed the fragments in a laboratory drawer, inert and dead. One simply missing, its last warden dead before a successor could be found. 44 remained intact, 44 words in a sentence that needed 47 to be read. He saw faces, dozens of them, flickering through his mind like pages fanned by wind. Men and women, across centuries, across worlds, each one ordinary in every way except the one that mattered. A cook on a freighter who had found a stele in a cargo hold mislabeled as ballast stone and spent 37 years ensuring it reached safety. A child who had touched a marker on a world his colony ship crashed on and built a wall around it with his own hands when the colonists wanted to break it for building material. None of them had sought the role. Each had simply been the person standing closest when the stone woke up, the person who heard the phrase and understood it not as a title of power, but as a description of a job. Ransom pulled his hand from the surface. The gold light faded to a steady glow, and the glyphs settled into a fixed configuration that he knew, with a certainty that came from the same place as the phrase, would remain stable as long as he was alive. He turned around. The vault was crowded now. The young judge stood closest, his crest still raised. Behind him, the two elder tribunal judges had moved fully into the room, the female elder's hands pressed together at chest height in the Kessaran sign of witnessing. Irath Vel stood behind them, her holopad dangling from limp fingers, her crest feathers lifted in involuntary or the position a Kessaran could not fake when confronted with something that exceeded understanding. The two guards flanked the doorway, their eyes on the glowing steel with the fixed stare of people who had decided that stillness was the safest response. "What did it say?" the young judge asked. Ransom looked at him. "It named me." "Named you what?" Ransom told him. The judge's crest trembled a single, involuntary vibration that traveled from root to tip. "There are more of these," the judge said. It was not a question. 46 others, on 46 worlds. And you are supposed to protect them. Ransom did not answer immediately. He looked at the stele behind him, at the gold phrase repeated across each face like a signature at the bottom of a letter addressed to him, and he thought about what the word warden meant. Not owner, not master, not king or chosen one. Warden, a guardian of a trust, a person who keeps the records straight and the doors intact and the lights on so that when someone finally comes to read what was written, the text is still there. "Yes," he said. The young judge nodded once. Then he turned to face Irath Vel and the elder judges, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the particular Kessaran register that was used not for arguments but for rulings, the tone that meant the words were already carved into the record and could not be unsaid. "The artifact is not Kessaran," the judge said. "It predates our presence on Belvathi by 2 millennia. Under Article 9 of the Accord's founding charter, pre-colonial artifacts of non-indigenous origin cannot be claimed by the territorial sovereign. They belong to the species of origin. The stele is human. This hearing is concluded." Irath Vel opened her mouth to speak. The elder female judge raised one hand, palm outward, the Kessaran gesture that meant the objection was anticipated and overruled before it was uttered. The elder male judge inclined his head a fraction of a degree, 2-1, with the young judge's ruling as the deciding voice. "Mr. Cade," the judge said, "you may take your artifact." Ransom nodded. He turned back to the stele, placed his hand on its surface one more time. The warmth was steady, patient, the warmth of something that had waited 4,000 years and was prepared to wait 4,000 more, and began calculating the logistics of moving a 2-meter, immovable material monument out of a basement vault, through a hostile capital city, and onto a ship crewed by 3 people, 2 of whom had no idea what they were now carrying. He had 12 hours before the Directorate's legal team would find a procedural lever to challenge the ruling. He intended to be in orbit in 6. The first problem was the stele's weight. His team's gravimetric scan at the Belvathi site had measured it at 812 kilograms, which was roughly 4 times what a stone of its dimensions should have weighed if it were made of any known material. The reinforced platform it sat on in the vault had been rated for 1,000 kilograms, which meant the Kessaran authorities had known the weight was anomalous and had accounted for it. What they had not accounted for was the possibility that someone would need to move it quickly. Ransom pulled his communicator from his pocket and keyed the channel for his ship, the Terran Heritage Foundation vessel Aldrin's Keep, currently docked at the Kesara orbital platform on a general research berth. Leela, I need you to bring the cargo shuttle to the tribunal complex. Loading bay, west side, level -2. You have the heavy lifter rated for 1,000 kilos. Leela Okonkwo's voice came back sharp and clear, carrying the particular tone of someone who had been waiting for bad news and was now receiving it in a form she had not anticipated. I have the lifter. I also have 3 Directorate Customs officers who just arrived at the docking berth with an impound notice for the ship. They say we're being held pending the tribunal's ruling. The ruling came down, we won. The Stele is ours. Then why do you sound like a man who just won and is running anyway? Because the ruling will be challenged within 12 hours, and I want to be gone in 6. The Directorate's legal staff is twice the size of our entire foundation. They will find a procedural lever. They always do. Get the shuttle. Tell Maz to prep the jump drive. I'll handle the customs officers from down here. Ransom, what happened in that vault? He looked at the Stele. Its glyphs pulsed once slowly, like a heartbeat measured in geological time. The Stele woke up, he said. I'll explain on the ship shuttle now. He closed the channel and turned to the young judge, who was still standing by the vault door while the elder judges and Erath Vel argued on the stairs in rapid formal Kessaran. Ransom's translator rendered the exchange as a blur of jurisdictional objections and procedural citations, but the gist was clear. Erath Vel wanted an emergency injunction. The female elder was citing precedent against it, and the male elder was saying nothing, which meant he was calculating. I need to move the artifact to my ship, Ransom said. I need loading access to the West Bay, and I need the impound on my vessel lifted. The judge studied him. You are in a hurry. The Directorate will challenge your ruling. You know that. I do. How long would your ruling hold? 12 hours, perhaps 14, before the appellate panel convenes. Longer if I can delay the filing. Can you delay the filing? The judge's crest lowered a fraction. Something that might have been amusement crossed his features, brief and controlled, the Kessaran equivalent of a dry smile. I can experience difficulty with the tribunal's filing system. These things happen. Systems are complex. Thank you. Do not thank me, Mr. Cade. I'm not doing this for you. I am doing this because I have studied the old records. The Belvathi site sits on foundations that predate everything we built there. I have seen the substratum surveys. I have seen the geometric signatures in the bedrock that match no Kessaran construction method, historical or modern. I know what is underneath. He paused. And I know that some things are not meant to be disassembled. Ransom held the judge's gaze for a moment longer than protocol required. Then he moved. Ransom took the stairs 2 at a time, past the elder judges still arguing in the stairwell, past Erath Vel, whose expression had shifted to the disoriented blankness of a person whose framework of argument had been made irrelevant. He crossed the tribunal chamber, stepped through the doors into the corridor, and headed for the West Wing. He had 14 minutes before the first Directorate enforcement team could reach the complex. Fewer if Erath Vel had prepositioned a team before the hearing, which she might have, because she was exactly the kind of counsel who planned for losses. The next 90 minutes were a controlled demolition of every logistical protocol the Terran Heritage Foundation had ever established for artifact transport. Ransom supervised the transfer of the Stele from the vault to the loading bay using the tribunal's own freight elevator, invoking the young judge's seal with the confidence of a man who knew its authority was temporary and intended to use every second before the clock ran out. The loading bay was underground, lit by industrial strip lights. Leela brought the cargo shuttle down through the access shaft, with the precision of someone who had been landing in tight spaces since before Ransom joined the Foundation. The shuttle's rear ramp touched the bay floor with a hiss of hydraulics, and the heavy lifter, a mechanical exoskeleton frame with gravitic dampeners rated for 1,000 kilograms, stood ready in the cargo hold. "This is the thing," Leela said, stepping off the ramp and looking at the steel. She was 41, lean, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and the steady eyes of a pilot who had never once in 8 years of working with Ransom expressed surprise at anything he had brought aboard her ship. She expressed something close to it now. Her gaze tracked the glyph sequences cycling up the steel's faces, the pale gold phrase that repeated on each side, the impossible material that caught the loading bay's industrial light and held it in a way that stone should not have been able to do. "It's glowing." "It does that now." "Since when?" "Since about 2 hours ago." "What changed 2 hours ago?" "I touched it." Leela looked at him, then at the steel, then at the heavy lifter in the cargo hold, then back at the steel, running the weight and balance calculation that every pilot runs automatically before loading anything that could shift the center of gravity of a ship that needs to make orbit. 800 kilos. 812. In a shuttle rated for 950. "I know. With us on board." "I know. Ransom, we are going to be very close to the limit." "We are going to be exactly at the limit, which is why I need Maz to have the jump drive warm before we dock. We are not lingering in orbit." Leela nodded once, the nod of a woman who had made peace with unfavorable numbers a long time ago. She directed the heavy lifter's operator, a Kessaran maintenance worker drafted into the operation with the calm professionalism of someone who had decided this was above his pay grade, to position the lifter's arms around the steel's base. The lifter clamped, the gravitic dampeners engaged. The steel rose off the platform with a mechanical groan that competed with the deeper hum still emanating from the stone, its glyphs flaring brighter as if the artifact knew it was being transported. They walked it into the cargo hold. The shuttle's deck plating flexed under the weight, and Leela checked every restraint strap by feel, running her hand along the tension, points the way pilots do when they do not trust instruments to tell the whole truth about something that weighs 800 kilograms and is glowing. "Secured," Leela confirmed. She looked at Ransom, and her expression had shifted from professional concern to something sharper, the look of a woman who had done the math and accepted the numbers and was now focused entirely on the sequence of actions that would get them from this loading bay to orbit before the numbers became someone else's problem. "We need to go. Now." 3 Directorate enforcement vehicles just entered the transit grid heading for this complex. I picked them up on the shuttle's approach scanner, fast movers, armed. Ransom was already moving up the ramp. "How long?" 7 minutes, maybe 8 if the traffic grid delays them. "That's enough, go." The Kessaran maintenance worker caught Ransom's eye in the last second before the ramp sealed. They exchanged a single nod, the wordless agreement of a man who had seen something that exceeded his job description and had decided to let it pass without report. Leela sealed the ramp, powered the engines with a start sequence trimmed to 11 seconds by skipping every non-essential diagnostic, and lifted off with a vertical ascent that pressed Ransom into his harness. The access shaft was narrow, built for docking speed, and Leela took it at twice that, threading the gap with a precision that left scorch marks on the walls from the engine wash. They cleared the shaft and hit open air. The city of Kessara spread below them, a geometric sprawl of pale stone buildings and green transit corridors under a sky the color of brushed steel, beautiful in the way that cities built by species with an architectural tradition measured in millennia were always beautiful, solid and deliberate, and utterly unconcerned with the small crisis playing out in its airspace. "Directorate enforcement is hailing us," Leela said. "Priority channel, 3 vehicles, 2 from the east, 1 circling from the north." The northern one is trying to get above us. Ignore the hail. They are requesting we return to the loading bay for inspection and citing Directorate Emergency Directive 4. That's the one for hazardous materials transport without a containment manifest. The steel is not hazardous. It's glowing, Ransom. From a regulatory standpoint, that qualifies. Transmit the tribunal ruling, the judge's seal, give them the case number and the Article 9 citation. Make them read every word of it. Leela transmitted. The enforcement channel went quiet for 23 seconds. Ransom counted each one and came back with demands for seal verification, the judge's personal confirmation code, and a warning that unauthorized departure constituted a criminal offense under Directorate Code Section 12. The ruling is valid, Ransom said. The appeal hasn't been filed. Tell them Judge Soravan-Kell issued the ruling under Article 9 precedent. If they want to challenge it, they can take it up with the appellate panel during regular business hours. Leela told them that, adding the Foundation's research credentials and the Heritage Act subsection authorizing species of origin transport. The channel went quiet for another 16 seconds. They're not buying it, Leela said. 2 of the 3 vehicles have adjusted course. Intercept trajectory. They'll reach our altitude in 4 minutes. The 3rd one is already above us. It dropped from higher altitude while we were climbing. It's trying to box us in. Ransom looked at the sensor display. 3 blips, 2 climbing, 1 descending. A standard containment pattern, textbook, the kind that worked on cargo haulers running unlicensed freight. Not on a shuttle with a valid ruling and a pilot who had spent 4 years flying rescue missions in 3 times this wind shear. The one above us has a tractor projector, Leela said. 200 meters and it can latch on, but they're atmospheric only, ceiling at 80,000 meters. We cross that line, they can't follow. How fast? 7 minutes if I dump the landing thruster reserve. We won't be able to land the shuttle again until it's refueled on the ship. Dump it. Leela dumped the landing thruster reserve. The shuttle's acceleration kicked hard, pressing Ransom into his harness, and the altitude indicator climbed in a curve that would have made any flight safety inspector reach for a pen and a violation form and possibly a sedative. The patrol vessel above them adjusted, trying to match the climb rate. But the mathematics of thrust to weight were not in its favor. The shuttle was lighter now, burning through its reserve allocation with the extravagant indifference of a vehicle that had committed to not landing. At 62,000 meters, the upper patrol vessel made its move. It dropped toward them in a shallow dive, its tractor projector powering up. Ransom could see the faint shimmer of the field on the sensor display, a cone of force reaching toward the shuttle's hull like a hand closing around a bird. Leela rolled the shuttle 30 degrees and pushed the climb angle steeper, trading lateral speed for vertical, and the tractor cone swept past them, missing the hull by a margin that Ransom did not want to know the exact measurement of. The patrol vessel pulled up, banked, and tried to reposition for a second pass, but it had lost altitude in the dive and needed 30 seconds to recover the height. 30 seconds was enough. Leela used every one of them. At 78,000 meters, the atmospheric engines were screaming, running at a temperature that the shuttle's thermal management system was flagging in urgent red text on every display. At 79,000, the 2 climbing enforcement vehicles reached their ceiling and peeled away, their hails shifting from commands to protests and then to silence. The upper patrol vessel made one more attempt to close the gap, its engines straining against thinning air, its tractor projector cycling uselessly at a range it could not close. At 80,000 meters, the patrol vessel dropped away. It circled once, like a raptor losing a thermal, and descended back toward the city, and the sky above the shuttle was black and full of stars. The sky darkened from blue to indigo to the black of space. Stars appeared, sharp and clean, and among them the steady light of the Kesara orbital platform and, docked at its general research berth, the familiar silhouette of the Aldrin's keep. "Maz," Leela said into the comm, "jump drive status." Maz Petrov's voice came back flat. "Drive is warm. Navigation plotted. Tava relay point, 3 jumps from Foundation space. But the customs officers left the berth 10 minutes ago with the expression of people who will be coming back with friends and official documents. How long before they can lock the berth?" "The orbital platform security rotation changes in 42 minutes. That's when the incoming shift will have authority to issue a docking clamp on a judicial referral. Before that, we're on a general berth with departure clearance still valid from yesterday's filing. Then we leave in 30. We leave in 30. Leela docked the shuttle with a hard lock that skipped 2 alignment protocols, the hull kissing the magnetic cradle with a clang that rang through the ship. The cargo ramp was open before the docking clamps finished cycling. They transferred the steel to the main cargo hold in 11 minutes, guiding the stone through a corridor designed for crates, not monuments, clearing the walls by 4 centimeters on each side. The steel took its place between sealed sample containers from the Orath Valley excavation, and a crate of pottery fragments from Belvathi Grid C, a monument standing in a storage closet, its glowing glyphs casting pale gold light across boxes labeled in Ransom's careful handwriting. He stood in front of it while Leela and Maz prepared for departure. The steel's hum threaded through every sound the ship made: environmental cycling, hull ticking, navigation computers chattering a deeper note, an undertone that had settled into a rhythm matching Ransom's heartbeat so precisely he could not tell where his pulse ended and the vibration began. He put his hand against the stone. The gold light flared under his palm, and the cascade resumed not the overwhelming flood of the vault but a controlled stream, showing him what lay ahead. The other steels, not all 47, but the ones most at risk. A marker buried beneath a construction site on Vasthelen, where pilings would reach its depth within 2 years. A marker in a private collection on Orathi, purchased by a Morevi industrialist planning to cut it into display segments. A marker in a government research facility on Kesara itself, undergoing what the records called non-destructive analysis, but what the network registered as slow violation each core sample, reducing its capacity to participate. Each image carried the steel's equivalent of urgency, transmitted through a medium Ransom's nervous system, interpreted as the sensation of watching something valuable being carried toward the edge of a table. He pulled his hand away. The gold light settled back to its steady glow. 46 steels still out there on 46 worlds, some buried, some exposed, some in the hands of institutions that would disassemble them for analysis without understanding that each one was a word in a sentence that could only be read whole. "Ransom," Ma's voice on the intercom. "Departure window in 4 minutes. I need you on the bridge." Ransom placed his hand on the steel one final time. The gold light pulsed beneath his palm, warm and steady, and for a moment the hum resolved into something that was almost language, not the 6-syllable phrase but something longer, deeper, a vibration that carried gratitude and patience, and the particular relief of a thing that has been waiting in the dark for a very long time and has finally been found by the person it was waiting for. He lifted his hand, the light held steady and fixed. "I'll be back," he said to the stone. The glyphs pulsed once, and he could not prove it meant anything, but it felt like acknowledgement. He climbed to the bridge. Leela was in the pilot's seat, running the pre-departure checklist for the 3rd time. Maz sat at the navigation console, his fingers moving across the display with the precise motion of an engineer forcing haste and accuracy into cooperation. "Priority signal from the surface to the platform's admin office," Maz said. "Directorate Judicial Branch. The appeal filing. They can issue a docking clamp in under 10 minutes once it's processed." Then we go now. Leela released the docking clamps. The keep drifted free, thrusters firing for maximum distance per second, and the platform began to shrink in the rear display. Navigation locked, Maz said. Jump point in 7 minutes at current acceleration. 7 minutes. Those 7 minutes felt like the space between the last card being dealt and the hand being called. Ransom sat in the command chair and watched the platform shrink in the rear display, waiting for the comm channel to light up with a directorate override that would lock them in Kessaran space. At the 3-minute mark it came. A burst transmission on the administrative frequency. Terran vessel Aldrin's Keep. This is Kessara Orbital Control. We have received a request from the Kessaran Directorate of Cultural Affairs to delay your departure pending review of a judicial matter. Please hold position and await further instructions. A request, not an order. The distinction mattered enormously. The injunction had not been processed yet. Respond that we acknowledge the request and are reviewing our departure schedule, Ransom said. That's a lie, Maz observed. It's a temporal observation. We are reviewing our schedule. The review has concluded and the schedule says we leave now. Maz transmitted. The platform repeated the request, this time with a note that the Directorate had flagged the matter as priority level, and that orbital control was obligated to escalate to the docking authority if the vessel did not comply within 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Maz said. We need 4. Then we have 6 to spare. That is not how I would characterize the margin. Jump point in 4 minutes, Leela said. At the 5-minute mark, a second transmission came through, not from the platform, not from the Directorate, but from the planet's surface. A private channel, encrypted with a civilian key that Ransom's system decoded automatically. The young judge's voice, stripped of judicial formality, speaking quickly and quietly. Mr. Cade, the appellate filing has been delayed. A technical fault in the tribunal's archival system, a cascading error in the document verification queue. These things happen in complex systems. You have approximately 9 additional hours before the filing can be resubmitted through alternative channels. Use them well. A pause. The old records mention the Wardens, not by that name, by an older one in a script we do not recognize, but the function is described. Protectors of the deep record. Keepers of the line that does not break. I did not understand the old texts until today. Another pause, longer. Safe travels, Warden. The transmission ended. Jump point in 90 seconds, Maz said. Below in the cargo hold, the steel hummed. Ransom felt it through the deck plating, through the soles of his boots, through the bones of his feet and the marrow inside them, a vibration that was not sound but kinship, the recognition of one keeper by the thing kept, steady and warm and as patient as stone. Ransom sat in the command chair and thought about what the judge had said. The old records, a script they did not recognize. Protectors of the deep record. The Kessarans had their own memory of the Wardens, buried in texts so old that the language they were written in had been forgotten. The pattern extended beyond human records, beyond Kessaran records, into a stratum of history so deep that every species in the Accord had touched its edges without understanding what they were touching. The Warden's real enemy was not governments or collectors or enforcement vehicles. It was the reasonable, institutionally backed conviction that understanding something required taking it apart. 4,000 years of Wardens had known better, passing the truth from hand to hand, from palm pressed against impossible stone, that some things can only be read whole. Jump, Ransom said. The jump drive engaged. The stars unfolded, normal space peeling back from the viewport like a curtain drawn by an invisible hand, revealing a transit corridor of bent light that looked like a river of liquid silver flowing in a direction human perception was not wired to interpret. The Kessaran system fell away behind them, the planet, the orbital platform, the enforcement vehicles. The appellate judges who would arrive tomorrow to find a filing queue with a cascading technical error, and a docking berth with no ship in it, all of it receding into the kind of distance that turned pursuit from a practical matter into a jurisdictional one. In the cargo hold, a 4,000-year-old monument carved in impossible stone continued to glow, its message fixed and clear, and addressed to a man who had spent his whole life doing exactly this, taking care of things that mattered, keeping them whole, carrying them safely through a galaxy that wanted to take them apart. 46 more, 46 steles on 46 worlds, each one waiting in its own silence, some buried, some exposed, some in the hands of people who did not understand what they were holding, all of them waiting for the touch of a hand that understood the difference between owning something and keeping it safe. Ransom Cade sat in the command chair and understood that everything he had done before this, every dig, every recovery, every argument in every tribunal had been preparation. Not for a title, not for power, for a job. The steel hummed, and the ship carried them both toward the next marker, and the unbroken line 4,000 years old, spanning 47 worlds, written in a language older than cities held.